The reason I call this exhibition Choices is because I feel very strongly that I probably would not have gotten through my life and the struggles of my life if it weren't for the art that I have in my life. And I'm sure a lot of other people feel the same way, but I find that while I'm doing my work, I make certain choices the entire time that I'm doing the work and based on what's happening with media. And it's kind of my metaphor for life in a way. You go through life and things happen and you have to kind of make choices. So that's that. I could have the next slide, please. This is an example of the painting that we just saw a moment ago. We'll have it again in a minute, but this is areas that I consciously mask out, either with masking tape or Frisket or contact paper or something like that. And once I let that happen, it kind of draws me in. And that's where I'm at. Bob, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, when the areas are, revealed to me, that's when I, make some choices about what I'm going to do. Recently, I've been extremely intrigued with the intricate patterns that happen underneath the masking, which couldn't happen if I were directing it. Years ago, I used to work with a process called batik, which had a lot of, which involves a lot of resist, and you would not know until you were finished with the piece, what it was going to be. And this kind of makes me think of that because I don't know what's going to happen beneath the masked areas until I've actually taken the masking off. You can see certain intricate designs that are there. And anyone who paints would understand this. Paint reacts entirely differently than ink. So I've kind of manipulated what's happening. I deliberately put ink underneath the masking to create certain things. And like, as I said, I don't know what's going to happen until it happens. Anyway, so could we go to the next slide, please?
It's not working.
Move on.
Okay. For some reason it's, let's see.
The next slide should be the actual painting. Finished. Yes, that's it. Okay. I wanted to have the pale blue color kind of dominating the scene. And this painting, as I've said before, I think, is called Cathedral and is is inspired by a visit that I had to the Sagrada Familia years ago in Barcelona. And Sagrada Familia is a cathedral that has been built for like 125 years, and they're still building it. When I entered it, I had a feeling of there were like light shadows and color shadows, and everything was streaming around, and it was a wonderful, very, very profound experience. So I like to capture that, and I've done a lot of paintings about that experience because it stayed with me a lot. Go on to the next slide, please. This is another example of a painting where I missed certain areas. Another thing that's happening that I've started doing is scratching texture into the surface of the painting, and you can see that. But the next slide shows a detail of that. Okay, and I felt that the painting was losing the scratch surface. It was kind of disappearing. It wasn't as obvious as I wanted it to be. So when I put pastel in the other masked areas, I made the conscious choice to kind of draw that into the scraped out areas. So that's what you're seeing right here. Next slide, please. And that's the final piece. And it's called Spiraling Down. And once again, you need to see the entire show because I'm only including 3 of my paintings that are in the show. And I will explain why in a second. And this painting is in the show. And next slide, please. Okay, this is from a series that I did, which involves, it's called the Trigger series, and I've worked on a lot. Trigger, Trigger. We have a lot of triggers in our lives that force us into dark areas, and I would like to think that there are happy triggers. And that was what I was thinking about. And I spent a lot of time working on that, and I have a lot of images about that, and I thought that it was just me. And recently my daughter moved a certain way, and I happened to see a tattoo on her shoulder, and it was birds flying in the air, which is, as I said, I would like it to be a happy trigger, and I would like everybody to kind of, when I see the birds flying through the air, to kind of be uplifted. We need uplifting right now, and I think about it a lot. I've even thought about the fact that the birds always exist, regardless of what happens. They're always flying through the air, and they're always there, and it lifts me up, as I said. Also, this painting, I have 2 kinds of masking that I'm involved with in my work, and the white areas represent areas that were masked out initially when I first did the painting, and the darker areas are after I masked it the first time. I painted it with umber or brown paint, and that was there, and then I masked it once again after it dried. My process tends to take a long time, and the process that my paintings undergo is extremely kind of dramatic from one step to the end. And I also, something that's become extremely important to me is cutting the final image. I work a lot on loose canvas, and I cut the image in the end. It's kind of my ultimate way of maintaining some control over how the image is going to look. And I did that with a lot of work. I think this the reason why I wanted to include this in my talk tonight was that I think this really is kind of an epitome of works that I've cut. There's a lot of cutting that's happened in this. I've cut into the middle and in other pieces, and was very, variously happy with things that happened, but this kind of has an image to me. So we can go on to the next slide, please. And this is the image when it's finished. And once again, as I said from the beginning, I made a lot of decisions. I was an art teacher for like 20 years, and I would always say to my students, don't start over again. I was trying to discourage them from starting over again because I found, as I was teaching over the years, we would run out of time, So I would try to discourage them from starting over again. And I'd say, you've created a happy little accident here. and you have a creative problem to resolve. And that's what would happen to me. What happens to me a lot of my work, hear myself saying that all the time. And there were areas here, the white was too stark for me in the end, so I deliberately put some pastel into those areas and paint into those areas and kind of tone it down so that it was on the same level as the brown areas. And we can go to the next slide.
Jeannine,
Yes.
what's the scale of that piece?
Maybe 36 by 33.
Oh, yeah, bigger than I thought.
36 inches. And this piece right now is not in the show that I'm having right now. It's not included, but I am including it in this talk because it kind of talks about the fact that I make choices right from the beginning, whether I'm going to work on canvas or paper. I could work on other surfaces, I guess, but right now I'm working with paper and canvas, and I find this piece, for instance, is on paper, and you can see, for instance, that I don't know if the cursor will work, the masked out areas, there's a very clean, crisp definition in that, which I don't always have when I work on canvas. So that's one reason that I included this, because I want to talk about choices a lot. And, even from the beginning, I have a choice whether I'm going to be working on paper, what size I'm going to work on, colors and stuff like that. Go to the next image, please. Okay, this is the piece when it was finished. And as I said earlier, when I was talking about the painting spiraling down, I've really gotten into texturizing areas and texturizing the surface of the painting. And you can see it in here. I like the way this came out. I make the conscious decision whether I'm going to include the what I call the spillover of pastel color that happens. And I have included that in the white area, in the masked area in the central part of the painting, and not in other places deliberately. And I think the next image is a detail of this, I think. Should be, yes. And it is. And you can see I'm going kind of wild with the texturizing and drawing into it. I put a lot of heavy gel medium on the surface and draw into it. And then, like I said, I decide whether I'm going to, after it dries, whether I'm going to enhance it with color or leave it. And that's where I'm at right now. And I think we can look at the next slide, please. This image is also on paper, and it kind of illustrates how I cut the shape of the final piece. And I also made a conscious decision when this was finished. I wish I had a picture of it, but what you see for the yellow areas and the green areas, they were really kind of muted, and they weren't as strong as I wanted them to be. So I deliberately collaged paper over them, over the painted areas. And paper looks entirely different than paint, but I like the effect. It looks really, really great. Along the side, on the left-hand side, there's also paper, and that's that. And the next slide, I think, shows some materials that I use. I'm sorry, was a detail of that.
Yeah.
And it shows, you can't really tell the paper is paper. It's tissue paper, and it's kind of mixed in with the color, which I want to happen. I don't want it to be really obviously a collaged area, but I like the fact that it really, really makes the yellow and green areas stronger than they were. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. And this is a part of my studio where I I have some of the materials that I use. As I said, I use a lot of, to create the design underneath the masking, I use inks, and I find acrylic ink works the best. And I have some pastels and a variety of masking materials. I use all kinds of things. I use tape, contact paper, Frisket, whatever works. And I also I paint with oil paint at times, so that's on the other side of my studio. And I'm very, very fortunate right now. I made the decision like maybe 10 years ago. My husband and I made the decision to create a studio out of my garage. So it's pretty big and it's nice and it's a wonderful thing. And I was saying earlier, I always felt that I should be someone who was an artiste and had a studio that I went off to in the morning, but it doesn't work for me. I need to have a studio in wherever I'm living, because I need to, do a lot of laundry, come back to my painting, and that's the way it is. And sometimes I arrive in the studio and I'm in my pajamas and painting away. And as a consequence, I have a lot of pajamas with paint on them. And that's it. And
Sweet.
that's it.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeannine. I love the way you have the uneven, the edges that are so thoughtfully shaped. It really makes them have a very antiquated or even primeval feeling to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeannine, how do you present them with the edges the way they are? Do you mount them? Do you?
They can be mounted. It depends if some, customers can frame them, and they are sometimes, framed. But my intention is to display them around the wall. The flatter, the better, because I don't like a lot of shadow around the edges.
Right. So if they were framed, they'd be floated inside a frame.
It could be, and that, like, as I said, I found over the years that every time I frame something, customer or whoever buys the piece winds up reframing it. So I try to stay away from framing. I make plenty of suggestions, and stuff like that, but it's kind of up to, the purchaser. My intention when I showed this work, it's basically the loose canvas work is attached right to the wall. I've shown some big pieces like that. And as I said, the only problem I ever have is if an area, if the bottom is not attached, it tends to flap away from the wall, which I don't really like. I want it to be flat. Okay.
Great. Thank you.